The moment I heard the title Avengers Doomsday, my chest tightened. Not because I expected another blow-by-blow superhero melee, but because the title whispered something larger, older, and darker. This isn't just another team movie, it smells like an ending and a beginning at once. I welcome you to MovieCast. I'm Liam Harrison, and today I peel back layers of a theory that reshapes the MCU's moral map. At the center stands Victor Von Doom, not merely a tyrant with armor and science, but a self-appointed savior with a mission. Locate and fix the people whose actions kicked off the incursions, those catastrophic collisions between universes. I noticed parallels immediately. Kang once claimed he alone could save the multiverse, warning variants to stop their games. Kang's arc is gone. But the fear he voiced persists, and Doom will take up that mantle. Only Doom's methods are far harsher. Where Kang argued, Doom will execute. This opening thread sketches the core of my journey today, and it's only the first layer of a theory that stretches towards secret wars. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality, and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. Kang the Conqueror traded in prophecy and paradox, standing over timelines with a prophet's urgency. I remember his chilling insistence that variants were destabilizing everything. But Kang never wanted sentimental cures. He wanted control and correction. With Kang effectively out of the field, Victor Von Doom fills the vacuum, but with a different temperament. I see Doom not as a pale copy of Kang, but as a harsher, more decisive surgeon. Kang warned, Doom diagnoses and operates. Doom's grievance runs deeper than conquest. He believes his world and lineage were stolen by cosmic negligence, and he intends to reclaim what was taken. That reclamation isn't political theater, it's an attempt to reorder reality itself. Where Kang held multiversal law as an abstract necessity, Doom treats it like personal honor to avenge. This shifts the stakes dramatically. If Kang offered a monstrous version of mercy, Doom offers remediation through force, and that moral inversion will pit him against the Avengers in ways Kang couldn't imagine. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality, and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. The list of people Doom hunts reads like a who's who of MCU fault lines. Wanda Maximoff, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Steve Rogers, and others who have, willingly or not, tangled with time and reality. I think of Wanda rupturing reality in grief, Strange bargaining with time itself, Peter Parker dragged across universes, and Captain America quietly changing his own past. To Doom, these are not heroic mistakes. They are structural failures. He sees patterns, threads that when tugged, tear the fabric between worlds. I've watched these characters interpret their acts as personal choices or necessary sacrifices. Doom does not. He reads them as triggers of incursions and will act accordingly. That reclassification, from human frailty to existential threat, reframes Avengers Doomsday. Rather than a rescue story, it becomes a courtroom where the defendants are superheroes and Doom is both prosecutor and executioner. This reconceptualization informs each scene, each confrontation, and every moral line the heroes must face as Doom singles out those he believes started the bleeding. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality, and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. Deadpool's chaotic path through timelines is the kind of disruption Doom notices first. I picture Wade crashing across realities, hunting an anchor being, finding Wolverine and pulling threads that were never meant to be grabbed. Wolverine, whose life is a knot of trauma, memory, and mutation, becomes an unintended pivot. When mercenaries and mutations leap between eras and branches, anchors shift and the multiversal balance tips. I sense Doom cataloging each rogue ripple, noting how irreverent jumps corrode stabilizing points. This isn't metaphysics for him, it's forensic evidence. Deadpool's reckless searches, fueled by jokes and bloodlust, leave behind fractures. Those fractures, multiplied over countless jumps and timeline trespasses, accumulate into a systemic illness. Wolverine's presence as an anchor being makes him uniquely dangerous, not because of violence, but because his survival and repeated returns across branches glue realities together in strange ways. Doom treats this glue as contamination to be excised. Steve Rogers choosing a life with Peggy in 1948 is the kind of intimate decision that ripples into cosmic consequence. I remember him holding the weight of friendship, duty, and longing, then slipping out of the timeline to live privately. On one level, it's the most beautiful closure a mythic hero could desire. On another level, Doom will read it as a fundamental breach. Absolute points and sacred vows aside, Captain America's retreat rewires an anchor moment, a canonical trajectory that helps set the modern age of heroes into motion. If core events that birthed the superhuman era are altered, then the entire scaffolding supporting branch timelines risks collapse. I found myself wrestling with that moral paradox. A deeply humane act, choosing love over war, becomes a candidate for cosmic censure. Doom's calculus is ruthless. Personal happiness is irrelevant if it endangers multiversal survival. That moral rigor will make him monstrous to us, but logical in his own ledger, and it's the friction between our empathy and Doom's arithmetic that fuels the film's drama. Wanda's grief in Westview and beyond ruptured reality in a way that taught the multiverse to listen when sorrow speaks. Monica Rambeau stepping through Lightspeed showed how ordinary people become extraordinary anchors, and Doctor Strange's bargains with time demonstrated the arrogance inherent in playing God with cause and effect. I watch these threads and see a portrait of cumulative destabilization. Each hero's agency, even when intended to protect, alters probabilities and consolidates branch events. Doom catalogs this not as tragedy, but as technical failure. These are the human variables he must correct, and the path from error to solution is cold. When a person with Wanda's pain warps a city, the damage is both empathic and literal. Doom will treat the literal as primary. Monica's quantum leaps made her a lighthouse for alternate timelines. Strange's closed-loop solutions created echoes that repeat across branches. Together, these actions form a web of anomalies. Doom, meticulous and unforgiving, draws a line through that web and prepares to cut what he deems rotten to save the tree. To understand Doom's judgment, I return to the mechanics. Nexus events, absolute points, anchor beings. Nexus events are the forks where choice cascades into branches. Absolute points are immovable fixtures, events the cosmos resists changing. Anchor beings are entities whose existence exerts gravitational influence across timelines, resisting deletion and holding narrative weight. I find this taxonomy useful because it explains why certain acts, like removing a core relationship, are treated differently than tinkering with timelines in small ways. Doom's strategy hinges on differentiating which disturbances are repairable and which are symptoms of more serious corruption. Absolute points, as we've seen in What If, are difficult to alter without severe backlash, but Nexus events are malleable and crucially tractable. Doom's approach will prioritize cutting the stems that grow unsafe branches while refusing to waste resources on absolute nodes he can't change. It's a bureaucratic, almost surgical philosophy of the multiverse. Identify, classify, excise. That clinical language makes Doom terrifying because it turns people into variables to be corrected. Did Cap's disappearance break an absolute point? I don't think so, and that distinction matters. Absolute points are cosmic bedrock. Cap falling in love feels human, but might not be absolute. Instead, I argue, it functions as a nexus event, a decision that spawns a viable branch. Doom cares about the branches because they multiply instability. If the universe allowed a branch where Steve lived a life with Peggy, that branch's mere existence changes probabilities elsewhere. Doom will therefore treat the act as dangerous, not sacrilegious. In my reading, the MCU differentiates immutable tragedies from mutable choices, and Cap's choice falls in the latter category. That makes it a target. Doom's mission is not to punish romance, but to remove branching factors that accelerate multiversal decay. So he is less likely to chase absolute points and more likely to neutralize nexus events, even when they resonate emotionally with us. Loki's final act rendered the sacred timeline into a multiversal tree studded with branches, each sprouting from nexus events. I picture it like an enormous organism whose limbs splay unpredictably. Endgame's time heist pruned the tree poorly, leaving cut stumps that regrew in unruly directions. The TVA's failure to properly account for those cuts let branches proliferate, and each branch creates pressure points where universes intersect or scrape each other. Doom reads this arbor metaphor literally. Too many branches, too many points of contact, and the vascular system fails. He isn't waging war on diversity, he's waging war on what he calls infection. That botanical image explains why Doom's solution looks surgical and absolute. Instead of firefights through city blocks, I expect experiments, graphs, and removals. The multiversal tree is thus his operating table, and every hero who caused a branching is a lesion he must inspect. Doom's method, as I imagine it, is precise and theatrical. He will transport each implicated hero back to the instant their nexus event unfolded and force a temporal correction that reseals the wound. I can almost see the set pieces, Doom's technology, or sorcery folding reality like a surgeon closing an incision while the heroes watch. The narrative advantage of such scenes is twofold. They allow personal reckonings with pivotal choices, and they let Doom justify his extremism as restorative. From a plot mechanics perspective, returning characters to the birth of their branching moment permits high emotional drama without creating cheap retcons. The audience sees consequences directly while the heroes confront why their best choices mattered and whether those choices can be unmade. This approach also gives Doom plausible agency. He isn't erasing people indiscriminately, he's attempting to heal specific breaks. Yet the scenes will carry moral ambiguity because healing requires consent from those who formed the wound, and theft of agency is the core ethical charge against him. A persistent obstacle is memory. If heroes are returned to earlier moments, how do we prevent them from remembering futures and reintroducing damage? The MCU has a handy precedent: memory wipes. I recall Doctor Strange surgically pruning memories and the TVA manipulating recollection as a bureaucratic tool. Doom could easily weaponize similar technology or magic to excise knowledge of future timelines, making correction effective. That possibility saves the premise from paradox fatigue. The film can show cathartic revisits without inviting infinite loop headaches. Still, I worry about the moral toll. Erasing memories is its own violence. I expect the film to explore that cost. Doom may justify memory alteration as necessary collateral damage, but characters like Wanda and Steve would feel violated. The narrative can leverage this friction to deepen emotional stakes. Curing the multiverse might mean sacrificing personal continuity. That trade-off is the perfect cruelty for Doom's characterization. He will choose the many over the one, and that choice defines him as tragic and monstrous simultaneously. It's important to be clear. This story isn't an attempt to resurrect the Infinity Stones as a convenient MacGuffin. The Stone's arc concluded. Their narrative role is complete. What remains is the struggle between an imposed sacred timeline and the anarchic proliferation of branch timelines. Doom's conflict isn't about gauntlets or cosmic gems, it's about governance. Who decides what timelines survive? The absence of Infinity Stones forces the film to wrestle with law, ideology, and the ethics of intervention. That's a richer thematic playground. Without magical cosmic shortcuts, Doom must rely on intellect, technology, mysticism, and a political narrative to justify sweeping actions. The stakes feel humanized rather than mythic, because choices, policy, and memory carry weight. That grounding makes Doom's critiques eerier. His methods are implementable within the MCU's established rules rather than contrived quests for ultimate power. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. A recurring confusion I clear up for myself and viewers is the difference between branch creation and cloning of Earth. Branching doesn't spawn an entirely foreign planet off stage. It rewrites the story on the same world that continues to exist in new ways. I think back to Endgame. The captain who lived a life with Peggy and the Cap who returned to the present are different outcomes from the same timeline fork, not duplicates on separate stages. This matters because Doom's interventions are surgical within a shared cosmological table. He doesn't wave a wand to conjure whole new planets. He edits the narrative threads that define lives. The film can dramatize how those edits play out on the same streets, with the same buildings repurposed by altered histories. Understanding that clarifies why Doom's war is intimate even when it's global. He targets stories, not geography, and stories are where heroes live. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality, and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. If I had to name a genesis for the current chaos, it's Avengers Endgame. The time heist solved an immediate crisis but opened a genealogical wound. Branching timelines proliferated where there once was a single sacred timeline. Loki's series and subsequent films and shows carry the echo of that decision. The TVA tried to impose order, but their intervention was incomplete. And No Way Home and Multiverse of Madness exposed the tinderbox. Doom's arrival is not random, it's reactionary. He sees the mess left by desperate heroes and bureaucracies and decides to take responsibility in ways the MCU hasn't seen yet. He will treat Endgame not as heroism, but as negligence, with catastrophic side effects. That reframing makes Avengers Doomsday feel like an accountability tale writ large, with personal histories serving as evidence in a multiversal inquest. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. Facing a multiverse on the brink, I see Doom arriving at a binary that will define the film's ethical spine. Option 1. Collaborate with the heroes to methodically seal dangerous branches, accept sacrifice, and rebuild a sustainable multiverse. It's ugly, bureaucratic, and slow, but it keeps some measure of individual continuity. Option 2, the nuclear option. Prevent the genesis of the superhuman era altogether, excising origin events so the cascade never begins. Both choices are monstrous in their own ways. The first forces intimacy and compromise, compelling heroes to choose which memories to release and which lives to let go. The second demands ideological obliteration. Remove the conditions that create anchors until the tree has no dangerous limbs left to prune. Doom's calculus might present the second as pragmatic. To me, it reads as authoritarian and genocidal in narrative clothing. That moral fork is the film's engine, setting allies against each other and forcing the audience to reckon with the cost of order. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. If Doom chooses the nuclear route, the logistics are grim and narratively intoxicating. He would target nascent nodes, the Red Skull's exposure to the Tesseract leading to Hydra, the super soldier project that created Steve Rogers, early experiments that birthed mutants or sorcerers, and key accidents that made people into anchors. Imagine cinematic sequences where history is pried open and small humiliating moments are altered. A syringe withheld, a letter lost, until entire lineages evaporate like breath. The horror comes from how mundane these interventions feel. Not giant explosions, but withheld opportunities, absent mentors, and missing laboratory notebooks. The film could use that quietness to amplify dread. Genocide becomes archival erasure, and Doom becomes an archivist of oblivion. The scale of that option spins the MCU into philosophical darkness. Is a multiverse without heroes preferable to one that bleeds into destruction? Doom will answer yes, and that answer is the moral heart of his villainy. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. Logistically, preventing origin events spins the wheel of paradox. I think Doom underestimates the improvisational capacity of causality. Remove one hero and another might arise to fill the moral vacuum. Erase an origin and a different set of events could create new unforeseen anchors. The MCU has always wiggled out of deterministic traps by leaning on character resilience and narrative elasticity. Doom's attempt at surgical prevention risks spawning contingencies he cannot anticipate. There's also the emotional unpredictability. Humans are stubborn and creative. Eradicating Steve might mean someone else becomes a symbol. Removing a sorcerer could birth a new mystic from an unexpected seed. Those second-order effects cascade, and Doom's plan might be both more necessary and more futile than he imagines. The film can mine this complexity for drama, showing the arrogance of attempting absolute control over emergent human narratives. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. Emotionally, the film becomes a study of loss under the rubric of necessity. Heroes may be asked to surrender memories, relationships, or their very origins for the sake of a functional multiverse. I imagine intimate scenes where characters watch mundane moments, a wedding, a lab breakthrough, a street fight, vanish like photographs burned in reverse. That psychological violence will be the film's true cost. Some heroes might willingly collaborate, seeing sacrifice as the only way to preserve countless lives they cannot know. Others will resist, valuing the sanctity of personal narrative over abstract survival. Those choices will fracture teams, create alliances of convenience, and force characters into morally compromised positions. I think the film should let us linger on those losses, so the final battle is not merely physical, but existential. Can identity survive institutional editing? Doom's cold pragmatism makes him terrifying because he asks the question and is willing to do the erasing. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. As Doom pursues equilibrium, his methods will likely create conditions ripe for secret wars. If enough branches are severed or miswired, continental fragments of reality could fuse into a patchwork battle world. citadels stitched together from different timelines with Doom at the apex. I see the film planting seeds of this transition, experiments that reconfigure geography, artifacts that anchor new realities to Doom's will, and moral compromises that centralize power. That scaffolding could elegantly bridge Avengers Doomsday to a full Secret Wars event, where the remnants of fractured multiverses are forced together into a grotesque mosaic under his control. The film will thereby function as both a courtroom drama and a primer for cosmic civil war, showing the human and architectural consequences of ideological extremism. Doom's monster is political as much as mystical. He reshapes not only people, but landscapes. Planting those seeds now primes audiences for an irresistibly large and strange future. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality, and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. The climax, in my view, arrives when Doom's rhetoric, the savior who must wound to heal, collides with the hero's refusal to be reduced to variables. The narrative crescendo is not merely a battle of blows, but of philosophies. Doom's utilitarian totality versus the Avengers' messy, often irrational humanity. I envision a scene where Doom reveals his ledger of incursions, showing cinematic evidence of branching consequences tied to each hero's choices. The heroes respond not just with punches, but with testimonies, with the messy facts of why they made certain choices. That confrontation forces the audience into an uncomfortable position. Are individuals allowed to act even if their actions have catastrophic side effects? The climax should pivot on that ethical axis, making the physical fight a symbol of a deeper metaphysical dispute. Whether the final sequence tilts toward compromise, tragedy, or authoritarian victory, it must honor the tension between order and the sanctity of the self. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality, and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. After the climax, several resolutions feel narratively plausible, and each carries different tonal consequences for the MCU. The heroes might broker a compromise with Doom, sacrificing select memories, or choosing targeted corrections that preserve identity while stabilizing branches. That outcome would be bittersweet, victory tempered by loss, with the Avengers emerging changed but intact. Alternatively, Doom could succeed partially, rewriting large swathes of reality and giving us a darker reconstruction era of the MCU that the next installments must unravel. The most extreme route, Doom's full success, would pivot the franchise into Secret Wars quickly, forcing survivors into a patchwork world ruled by his law. Each path would leave moral residue, who authorized the erasures and who will remember. My sense is Marvel will choose a middle path, preserving key characters while setting up a larger conflict. The ambiguity of any resolution is the point. The film should refuse comfortable closure and instead hand the multiverse a wound that future stories must treat. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality, and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology. That's my take on Avengers Doomsday, a film I think will interrogate what it means to save a multiverse at the cost of selves we love. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please like, share, and subscribe to MovieCast. I'm Liam Harrison, and your support keeps deep dives like this alive. If you want to help the channel further, consider a super thanks of $20 to support production and research. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time as we keep peeling back the layers of story, consequence, and the strange ethics of saving worlds we may never meet. I keep returning to this idea because story reshapes reality, and we inherit the consequences of choices across time and narrative. The stakes feel personal because character choices compound into cosmology.